Bechor Achsanya, I stood here on Friday speaking to the grade 11s and 12s, and it's an honor to be back at the Liebler Yavne College, Mora Schuller, Rabbi Cowan, and all the wonderful staff of the college. Rabbanim Chashuvim, Melbourne, Rabbi Brill, the Rosh Kollel, and our moderator, and all the Rabbanim from Melbourne. My friend Rabbi Shua Solomon, who's come from Sydney. I'm going to Sydney tomorrow. He made sure that he's not in Sydney when I'm there. Well done, Rav Shua. Thank you for being here for this wonderful evening and all the work you do for Mizrachi in Sydney. The committee of Mizrachi, President Benji Djokovic and the whole committee, immediate past presidents David Brickman and the entire committee, which we look so forward as we have all of the years to continue to work together to build on our wonderful relationship. Danny and Rolene Lamb, as Danny said, I think it's more than 15 years, but Danny was on the search committee, and we work very closely together as the Vice President of World Mizrachi for all the work you've done here over decades and for World Mizrachi for decades now as well. Rafi and Aliza Lamb, Rafi's on our board and does so much for Mizrachi, for World Mizrachi. And all of you here today really celebrating 80 years of Mizrachi Melbourne. As I said in Shul, I have to repeat it briefly, it is really unusual that there is a community like this. It's unparalleled to any other Mizrachi around the world, where the Mizrachi organization of Melbourne runs an important national kashrut division. The Eruv in Melbourne, involved in the Beit, has such a wonderful shul community with so many minyanim. Wonderful Beit Midrash, the Midrash for women, the Beit Midrash for men that we're celebrating 25 years today for this wonderful event. Such an incredible school, the Liebler Yavne College. To have all of this under one rubric is a remarkable achievement. And shkoyach for 80 years, not only add 120, far beyond, to continue to serve this wonderful community. So we're here also for 80 years of Mizrachi, 25 years for the Beit Midrash, but I understood that we're really here to celebrate Kara's 20th graduation from Liebler Yavne College and Ray's 18th anniversary here at Mizrachi. That I didn't know before, but now I do. And of course, it's an unbelievable privilege for me to share this platform with Ambassador Mark Regev. I am one of those people who read you every week, and I've noticed a very positive tone the last number of weeks particularly. And thank you for the wonderful work you have done. I mean, who am I to thank you? But shkoyach for really the incredible work that you've done across governments, which is a big achievement, and an official ambassador of the State of Israel in the UK, and such an articulate, one of the finest sons of Australian Jewry to represent Israel in this way. It's an honor to share this platform with you. I want to talk about one word. This whole next few minutes that I have is really about one incredible Hebrew word, and that word is mashber, crisis. We are going through a major crisis in Israel, as you all know, and as we'll speak about in the moments ahead. It's a tremendous mashber. I don't know if in recent history has the Israeli army ever been brought so centrally into Israeli politics. Not getting involved right now, right or wrong. It has huge ramifications. Thankfully, it's not the standing army. Thankfully, it's not the permanent force. I'm very privileged to have two sons in Israel's permanent force as officers. But it is affecting the reserve force in significant ways, Israel's economy, and bringing things that one would have thought were part of Israel's consensus into the political fray. Some real challenges that this judicial reform that we'll speak about has brought out at the core of Israeli society. It's a mashber. As I was writing the epilogue of the book that I was very privileged, I also want to thank the Teller family. I'm staying at the Tellers. When I normally come to Melbourne, I stay at the Seagulls. Sam and Judy aren't here. And I thank Daniel and Amanda always for their hospitality. So it was lovely to be with them. And I just want to say that when I was writing the epilogue of the book, it was in January 2023, and they just announced the judicial reform. And in the epilogue, I managed to slip something in. I want to share with you, Ambassador Reg will be very familiar with this. Some of you here will be familiar with it because it's been spoken a lot about in Israel in recent months. My son, during his officer training, had a certain speaker who came to speak that I'd never heard of. His name is Nathaniel Ellenson. He's the head of a mechina in Israel. And he wrote a book 2 years ago called Kitzur Toldot HaYisraeliyut, a short history of Israelism. And my son told me about what he said, and I was blown away by what he said. I then went and I bought the book. And I want to share with you his thesis, and I write about it in the epilogue of the book. He says, and I'm sure some of you have heard of this, and it's quite harrowing, and it was very uncomfortable to read. He said, Israel, both in its first commonwealth in King David's time and second commonwealth in the times of the Hashmonaim, unraveled in the 73rd year. The 8th decade is always challenging. King David was appointed king in Jerusalem for 33 years, 7 years before in Hebron. 40 years Solomon ruled, and in the 73rd, 33 plus 40, what happened? The kingdom was split. Rechavam, Yerovam. The kingdom split tragically into two different states. The state of Israel in the north and Mamlechet Yehuda in the south. And so much tragedy, the 10 lost tribes and other things happened as a result of that. Then he says the same thing happened in the times of the Hashmonaim. In the time of Shimon HaChashmonai, the only one of the 5 sons of Yehuda of Matityahu, Kohen Gadol, to survive the war, he became king and established the Hashmonai, the Hasmonean. And then his son Yochanan, Kohen Gadol, ruled. Then his son Yanai, and in the era of Yanai, his 2 sons Aristobulus and Hyrcanus were having an internal debate of who should be king. The one reached out to Pompey as Rome was an ascending empire, brought the Romans into Israel, and bringing the Romans and giving them a foothold in Israel at the time, in Judea at the time, eventually brought about the destruction of the temple. And maintains Ellenson, we seem to, excuse the expression, mess it up in the 8th decade. And he has a thesis. He says the first generation, he calls them Dor HaMeyasdim, the founders. They're the founding generation, sweat and toil, who didn't have a state before and they rebuild it. The second generation is called Dor HaBonim, those which build on the achievements of the founding generation and knew them. And then the third generation he harshly calls Dor HaHorsim, those which destroy. They don't remember the founders. They take things for granted. Vayishman, Yishrun, Vayivat. Things are the way they're supposed to be. They don't know the challenges and travails of building a country from scratch and building it and sustaining it. They haven't fought any major wars as the founding generations and fought over the first 25 years. And we have to be very careful that that doesn't repeat itself. I'm very confident and believe, as Ambassador Regev does, with tremendous positivity, as a politician Ram Emanuel once said, never ever waste a good crisis. When a crisis comes in your life, don't waste it. It's there to unravel and to bring you to a greater level of consciousness and hopefully for the Jewish people. And the truth is, the word mashber is a fascinating word. Firstly, it's built on the root word shever, to be broken. And therefore, lishbor, we break things. Shever is brokenness. But shever is also prosperity. The mashbir in Yerushalayim. Joseph is called 10 times the mashbir. Let's go to Egypt, says Yaakov, lishbor shever, right? What is lishbor shever? It's not to break bones. It's to go and find sustenance in times of famine. The word lishbor doesn't only mean to break, and it doesn't mean just to go buy grain. It means to go acquire grain at a time of crisis, a time of famine, a time of desolation. There's an oasis of hope always. There's shever everywhere. Everyone around you is broken. But there's also shever, mashbir. There's an opportunity to provide sustenance, to provide hope. And that is really what shever is. It's not only brokenness, but it's the Jewish way of saying within the challenge and the famine there's always the opportunity for hope and oasis of prosperity. And all of you, I'm sure here, know that the word mashber in the Torah, in Tanakh, is not only a crisis as it's become, but of course, it's the birth stool where a woman gives birth who, if anybody was watching what was happening, not knowing with all the blood and the pangs and the pain and the difficulty and the challenge, out of that comes life and comes a child, b'damayich chayi, and therefore a mashber is an opportunity for growth. And Bezrat Hashem, that will come out of this deeper understanding. It will require a lot of humility, but Bezrat Hashem will get there. As they say, as we say in Israel, Ein lanu eretz acheret, there's no other land that the Jewish people have ever called their own as a people. Ein breira, we have to get it right because this is the only country which is ours. And famously, Chief Rabbi Herzog famously said only he could have said something like this with such confidence. When Rommel was approaching Palestine in the 1940s, and it really looked that, God forbid, it would be the end of the Yishuv, people came to him and said, it's time to clear out the Yishuv. What you're going to risk, the whole Yishuv getting destroyed by Erwin Rommel, and everyone knew who Erwin Rommel was, the Desert Fox. And Rabbi Herzog said, without batting an eyelid, there will not be a third Khurban. The Jewish people have begun returning en masse. Yes, there isn't a Beit HaMikdash, but hundreds of thousands of Jews have returned in unparalleled ways. When that starts, we have a tradition that there is no other nivuot of, nowhere does it say in the prophecies that the Jews will return a third time and then get destroyed and come back. And of course, none of us are prophets, and only Rabbi Herzog could say such a thing with confidence, believing that the kibbutz galiot, imagine if that was said then in the 1940s, what would he say today with over 7 million Jews in Israel, and believing with confidence that once the Geulah, the return collectively of the Jewish people, building this incredible country after so many years of suffering, he believed, based in prophecy, that it will be rebuilt and not stopped. That doesn't mean there aren't challenges. It doesn't mean there aren't enormous challenges, but Bezrat Hashem, the renewal of Jewish sovereignty in our era will continue to grow from strength to strength. And I just want to quote one thing. I will talk very briefly about the book that I've had the privilege to write and launch for a few moments at the end. But the second part of the book is based on 4 ideas of Rav Kook, of understanding what the purpose of a Jewish state is and how to unite it. And in the chapter 9, it's entitled Brit, the revolutionary idea of covenant, I try and focus on an idea that Rabbi Sachs and others have written about, on the difference between a social contract and a covenant. Most countries come together for self-interest. Politics is, as Ambassador Regev said, about self-interest. But the Jewish people's coalescing as a people cannot be based in self-interest. It's not a social contract. Rav Kook says for all other nations around the world, society is one great insurance company. We all get together to ensure our own survival. It's ultimately driven by collective society to protect individual self-interest. Not so the Jewish people, says Rav Kook, and not so, says Rabbi Sachs. A society should be built on covenant. A covenant, as he defines, is not a contract. It differs in 3 respects, says Rabbi Sachs. It's not limited to specific conditions and circumstances. It is open-ended and long-lasting. It is not based on the idea of 2 individuals, otherwise unconnected, pursuing personal advantage. It's about the we that gives identity to the I. There is a place for contracts, of course, but covenants are prior and more fundamental. They form the matrix of mutuality within which contractual relationships can exist. And 283 times, the Torah and Tanakh speak about Brit. Arguably the most central idea of God's relationship with the Jewish people in the world is Brit. It's a covenant built on far beyond mutual self-interest. And I think it's that Brit and covenant at the heart of Jewish society, which is being tested and challenged, especially in the last 7 or 8 months, that need careful attention. And it's that we'll speak about, I'm sure, in the minutes ahead. And Bezrat Hashem, as I spoke about in Shul on Shabbat morning, another idea of Rav Kook, how Jewish unity has to be built around 3 pillars of connection to Torah and Jewish identity, connection to nationhood, Am Yisrael, and of course connected to universalism and humanism, a broader vision of the equality of all before the law, and a vision of being a light unto the nations. And that is our great opportunity. And Bezrat Hashem, I believe, from this mashber, and it is a mashber, will arise the mashber, the birth stool, to give for the Jewish people and Jewish society, please God, in the state of Israel, deeper understanding and depth to Bezrat Hashem, the next 75 years of Israel ahead. Bezrat Hashem. Thank you very much.